Corpseland! I really did not like this show as a kid. I thought all the characters were unlikable and stupid, episodes were boring and preachy, and the horses made me uncomfortable. They remind me of the Niagara Falls ice cream. But I know a lot of people love this show and there was a big fan base for it, so I decided to give it a chance while making the Trolls video. I ended up watching the eating disorder episode, which is a complete mess and very, very bad. And once my script was all done and I was ready to edit it, Lee Speaks dropped a retrospective on the whole show and they talked about this episode. And now I'll look like an unoriginal loser if I drop the video on it. So I scrapped that. But you wanna know what had a good eating disorder episode? American Dad! Starting in 2005 and still going on with 20 seasons, American Dad is a sitcom satirizing American nuclear families. In an era of really bad Family Guy clones, this managed to be one of the few gems. There's not a lot of standalone videos about it, nor do you see people cosplaying it all the time, but I guess that's what you expect when you're only the 4th longest running adult cartoon. Because an animated show can only last 2 seasons or over 10 because there's no in between. It features man of the house Stan, who's also a CIA agent, as well as his stay-at-home wife Francine, their alternative daughter Haley, and their son Steve. And their talking goldfish Klaus, who has the mind of a German Olympic skier trapped inside of him. And Roger, their alien, who saved Stan years before the show, meaning he's pretty much legally obligated to live in their house rent-free. American Dad has been airing for a long time and it's built up a good reputation amongst the animation and TV fans. It has good relationships between characters, interesting, relatable, and even emotional plots, and it's funny. If you're an adult cartoon hater, it's a heavy recommendation on how adult cartoons can manage to be good and funny while also allowing themselves to be adult and provocative. It has a bunch of great episodes, like the one that we'll be talking about today. Airing in 2006 as part of the 3rd season, titled The American Dad After School Special. Trigger warning for eating disorders, weight, anorexia, body dysmorphia. It starts off with Steve trying to escape gym class by hiding in the vents, where he meets a girl named Debbie also trying to skip. Steve comes home and tells his family he's in love with her, and he tells them she was in a school play, which makes Stan think she's a beautiful actress. Steve reminds them that he likes her because of her personality, and the family tells him they're excited to meet her.
It'll be nice to have a pretty girl around the house for a change. I meant a pretty younger girl. Don't get mad at me, it's called makeup.
Later, Steve tells Stan he hasn't actually asked her out yet, so he puts a collar on him that will make him explode unless he asks.
Steve, what are you doing here?
Oh,
I'm so glad you asked me out. This is my favorite spot.
It's so romantic.
Debbie comes over for dinner and Stan's shocked to see that she's fat. He responds appropriately by locking the family in the panic room. The rest of the family disagrees with Stan and points out how he's not one to talk.
Good God, it's true! I've become one of them! Ah!
After this, Stan is seen dieting and working out and hiring a trainer named Zach. Meanwhile, Debbie and Stan make out as Roger watches because he's in love with Debbie since she looks like Mr. Belvedere. Listen, it's a throwaway joke, so I didn't want to explain this random subplot, but it matters in the end, I swear. Francine and Haley inject Stan's celery with lard, which makes him even bigger. And finally, the family tries another intervention where we learn the truth about Stan's weight.
Look at me!
It's worse than we thought!
I know! I'm a huge tub of lard!
It turns out the whole time Stan's been skeletal, and Zach isn't even real. They force him into a support group where he makes a friend named Veronica, and she teaches him the trick of hiding food in his mouth for days. Meanwhile, Stan breaks up with Debbie because he thinks their relationship caused Stan's anorexia. Stan keeps practicing the hiding food trick to make his family think he's eating. Meanwhile, Steve still misses Debbie, so Stan tries to set him up with Veronica to help him get over her. At the same time, Roger takes Debbie out by posing as an interviewer for the Anne Rice newsletter. I love when Seth MacFarlane shows reference random pop culture only old white people would know. Francine discovers what Stan's actually been doing with his food. They come to confront Stan and Steve rants to him about how he only broke up with Debbie because of him, and he still loves her regardless of her weight. She hears this and they're back together. Steve defeats his gym bro demon Zach and supports Debbie and Steve, deciding to get help, but he still doesn't support Haley's makeup choices.
Haley, are you wearing makeup? You look like a whore.
There's so many good things to say about this episode. Let's just start with Stan. story, we follow Stan's perspective, which really helps the audience get in the mind of somebody with an eating disorder and better understand why he would ever go through this by, in a way, tricking the audience. As he tries to lose weight, he can only see himself as bigger than he is because he's become so fixated on the fact that he's fat. Francine and Haley only call him fat once. After this, they keep telling him that he's not, but he can't believe them. Their one instance of calling him fat can be interpreted in multiple ways. Judging by how Stan reacts to Debbie's weight, it's clear he cares a lot about appearances and must care about his own. So Francine and Haley's comment may have played on pre-existing insecurities, or it could be the first time that he became aware of how he's perceived, and it contrasted with how he wants to be seen, leading him to wanting to change that perception. Both are very common ways people with eating disorders get treated by those around them that lead to their problems with weight, showing how easily people can fall into eating disorders and the impact outside sources have on the self-perception of those with EDs. Since they imply that he's fat, the audience watching, regardless of their opinion on weight, have it established to them that in this universe, Stan can be considered fat, just like it establishes it to him. Building off of this, we then watch Stan get bigger and bigger to the point where he's clearly unhealthy. It doesn't make any sense because he's intensely exercising, but he's getting bigger, so we believe whatever he's doing isn't working. He reaches a point where it's impacting his daily life, making it clear that regardless of opinions, he does need to lose weight now, especially because he can't work. This culminates in the reveal that he was never overweight, but instead incredibly underweight. In that moment, the audience realizes that they were tricked by Stan's perspective as an anorexic person. People with eating disorders are sometimes treated as crazy.
Stop it! You're not fat! Now come on, I made your favorite pot roast.
Get that away from me! Die, calories, die!
Many people believe only those who are stick thin can be anorexic, which isn't that case, and anyone at any size can have any eating disorder. For those uneducated on EDs, they can only think about their own perspective when they see people deep in eating disorders and are unable to see how the one with the disorder could possibly view themselves as anything more than what they physically see. But by breaking down the thought process and worldview of someone with anorexia, it becomes clear to those with little knowledge on how eating disorders develop and how people with them function. They understand his frustration with not losing weight and being unable to be happy with his appearance, which is all done by essentially tricking them, which Stan also does to himself through his body dysmorphia. Stan's inability to see his true weight and how he really looks is body dysmorphia, a condition where people see themselves differently than how they appear, oftentimes manifesting alongside eating disorders. Although not everyone with eating disorders has it, a large portion do, and it greatly impacts their disorders. It causes many to see themselves at a drastically different weight than they are and fuels their poor perception of themselves and encourages them to lose more and more weight, which they show with great accuracy through Stan. This brings me to my next point, that while the episode does a great job at laying down the anorexic mindset to viewers unaware, it also delves into very common parts of eating disorders and anorexia that those with them can quickly recognize and relate to. Like I said, Francine and Haley's comment is an experience many people with eating disorders have. Alongside that, there's the anorexic voice in the story, Zach. He's a personification of Stan's anorexic voice and so accurately shows the way people with eating disorders speak to themselves and treat their efforts to lose weight, aside from the staple look sad in the mirror that we usually see.
I couldn't help noticing you're kind of fat and pathetic.
And you're kind of perfect and scrumptious. What's your point?
Name's Zach. I'm a personal trainer. I wear a trucker cap, and I can mold you into a dude who won't send the ladies puking.
I'll do anything to look like you. When can we start?
Don't waste time asking questions when you should be rocking it. Exercises everywhere. See those kids? Potential barbells. Now rock me 200.
Shut up and help me count.
Later on, Stan's recovery isn't linear. He's very much against getting help, as most people with EDs are. When he finally does decide to change, it's because he's finally changed his outlook on weight and his appearance, not because his family just forced food down his throat and made him eat, which is the exact thing you don't do to those in recovery. Although they do try to do that to him earlier, but it also sadly just makes him more relatable. Also, I think one of the best parts is that Stan is nasty. He's so mean, especially to Debbie, which is exactly how people with eating disorders are.
Where's Debbie? Behind that fat girl?
No, Dad,
Is the fat girl going to lead us to Debbie?
No, that's...
She's carrying a purse. She must have a map to Debbie in her purse.
Dad, that's Debbie!
People with EDs are so conscious about their own weight that they project it onto others. Just take all those skinny inspo accounts who just post pictures of fat people they don't know to feel better about themselves. People with eating disorders are miserable, which is often why a number of them are such assholes, not only to themselves but others too. Commenting on others' appearances and weight all the time, especially on the internet. So I loved how he's just a complete jerk to her because yeah, They usually are. It's also great that they chose Stan for this message. They could have gone down a much more standard and typical route by picking one of the girl characters, as if it was Francine or Haley, people would have preconceived expectations. Things like them caring about what boys think about them or comparing themselves to models. And if they chose not to include these cliches, the audience may not have understood the message as well, as that's what they think all eating disorders entail, since it's most commonly seen. But by picking Stan, they got to differ from audience expectations, because people don't have those stereotypes with men, since so many people don't even realize men can have eating disorders.
Now, I know in high school, in the showers with the other girls, you feel uncomfortable with your body.
I'm not in high school.
When was the last time you menstruated?
I've never menstruated.
Hear that, girls? Cautionary tale. Anorexia will dry up your ovaries like tobacco in the sun.
Which in fact really helps Zach stand out even more. Stan's anorexic voice being a fit gym bro is so on the nose. Again, this can relate in two ways. Zach can both be Stan's inspiration with how he wants to look, while also representing the amount of men you will meet who are so obsessed with the gym that they trap themselves in eating disorders like orthorexia that no one acknowledges, because that's not what we've been told eating disorders look like. They could have chosen Zach to be a model, which would work, but this take is so smart because it once again shows a very relatable real life example that many people don't understand. Overall, it does an amazing job at challenging the audience's understanding of eating disorders, while also showcasing real examples of what eating disorders are. Anorexic bestie. Veronica is in the same program as Stan, and she's just as resilient to getting help. She's a more common archetype for anorexia, being a thin teenage girl, giving the creators a chance to once again show that anorexia doesn't appear just one way. Furthermore, she highlights a big in part of anorexia being the community of anorexia. Eating disorders feed off competition. That's also partially why Stan's such an asshole. People with anorexia will constantly compare themselves to others and use it as fuel to become the skinniest of them all in order to win this imaginary competition. Whether it's in person or online, it's very common to see anorexic people getting into support groups where they encourage one another to become skinnier, showing off new techniques to one another on how to not eat, finding thin inspiration, and encouraging one another that they can lose more weight. Being around their competition encourages them to lose more weight, which is exactly what Veronica shows. She appears as a friend, but their friendship only exists to fuel one another's anorexia, which is true to what a lot of people experience in real life. Many people don't know that there's whole communities surrounding eating disorders, especially surrounding anorexia, so it's very interesting that they wrote this into the episode and showed it really accurately. The one thing that's not good in this episode is Roger being in love with Debbie. He's in love with her because of a throwaway joke where he says that she looks like Mr. Belvedere, which Roger is a fan of in the beginning, and then he never mentions this again until a couple years later where he actually says that he's never seen Mr. Belvedere. This is supposed to be a B-plot, but it's kind of not, because it's not really a plot. Most of the runtime is spent with Stan, and they clearly only put this in to help with the ending because they needed a reason for Debbie to also be at the same restaurant as Steve and Stan, which they could have done in a million ways without Roger coming off as a creep. And I know in earlier seasons, Roger was shown as a weirdo and kind of a creep, but I don't care because I'm about to say something really crazy here. I don't like characters acting like perverts. This has always been a thing, but especially in the 2000s, it was common for there to be one male character who was either a womanizer or incredibly horny, and from time to time just harass women. I don't think it's funny. I hate when I'm watching old shows and I get jump scared by a character who acts like this. I just hate it. And it's the one thing I wish was not in this episode. But a 7-minute subplot doesn't take away from the rest of the episode, so they're lucky. Eating disorders are always complicated to talk about in the media because people with them take inspiration from anything. For example, a lot of the time in these special episodes, characters starve to the point where they faint, which doesn't matter to the person with an eating disorder, because they may have fainted, but the fact that they successfully lost weight is all that matters to someone with an ED. Accidentally, shows can end up showing ways to get into an eating disorder while trying to show why not to. However, triggers depend on the audience and the context. Something like Horseland is made for a younger audience, an audience that doesn't know about this issue and is easily impressionable. So being shown all these ways the character Pepper partakes in her eating disorder could serve as inspiration for them, as it's the first time they've been exposed to this. Also in that episode, Pepper is considered to be fat, and she does need to lose weight, which only solidifies the means she's using in an impressionable mind. Also, her recovery and how she ends up losing the weight helpfully is never shown to us, only adding fuel to the fire. But a documentary like Thin is meant to show a raw and realistic example of eating disorders. This is something clearly meant for an older audience and meant to be educational, which means showing and talking about triggering parts about EDs. But in this example, it's clear that it's meant to educate, and people with EDs know from a glance that this could be triggering. Since they can take inspo from anything, it doesn't mean eating disorders shouldn't be talked about. It means that they should be well understood and carefully portrayed to lessen triggering those who have them or making people begin to follow them. I think they do a good job with how Stan looks. He looks terrifying and funny at the same time. They keep his large shoulders and biceps making it look like he just has gigantic ribs, which helps in making his appearance less triggering because this can physically not be achieved due to how cartoony he looks. Meanwhile, Veronica looks like how we're used to seeing people with anorexia, showing the audience the reality of it, while also once again making clear within the whole context of the episode that this isn't something to strive for. But they really do this the best by making jokes.
Look at her, she's the picture of health.
Not jokes that feel malicious or rude, but normal jokes that fit in with the show. These jokes target skinny and fat people and help lessen the serious tone.
Debbie, you had me at lasagna.
I never said lasagna.
Well, I was thinking about it.
Another thing I really like is the anorexia tactics. The only thing we see Stan doing is exercising a lot and eating restrictively. We don't see a lot of this as it's mostly characters just talking about him doing it, not emphasizing what he's doing to lose weight, but instead focusing on his thoughts and how he sees himself. Ever Stan's participating in these tactics, it's usually interrupted with a joke or exaggerated to take the focus away from what he's doing to lose weight. A good example is when he meets Veronica and she tells him to hide his food by stuffing just the whole thing in his mouth and keeping it there for days. This won't give people inspiration because it's not physically possible, while still exaggerating actual anorexic habits to make it recognizable for those who know about them or want to identify them, and overall making a really funny joke whenever he does this. It's a great example of how to dodge triggering scenes while also keeping the portrayal real and honest. The name itself is a reference to special episodes of sitcoms, usually following a teenager who forgets to eat for a week because they're busy, start to feel fat. These episodes are all usually the same, talk about a serious topic in a very shallow way. This ultimately doesn't help those going through issues with their weight and food and downplays them instead. American Dad shows how a very special episode can be done well, taking place over months, focusing on a man rather than a teenager, not having the climax be when he faints. Also, they use the word anorexia. They say that's what Stan has and they don't act vague about it like other shows with these topics do, which is great. Because it isn't just a bad diet or a one-time thing, it's an illness with a real name, and that's okay because you can get help for it. And what makes all this crazier is the fact that this episode was made in 2006. The 2000s was an absolutely insane time for diet culture, and anybody who lived through it knows.
And forget, appearance, because people have made comments about her not being in peak shape.
There were celebrities' weights constantly being scrutinized. There was multiple big-time celebrities with clear eating disorders in the media. And fashion and entertainment as a whole supported trends and media demonizing fat people, encouraging unhealthy skinniness.
The way you dress and stuff, I don't think you're aware that you're a heavy-set woman. That's what I said.
I know I'm a big woman, so what?
So I was guessing your weight. And I was going to say to you today, can you please get on the scale and then we'll have an over-under. That's all.
No.
Why not? Why not?
I'm not going to get on the scale if you got to weigh me.
If you get on the scale, I'm serious.
Why would you want me to get on the scale?
I'll tell you why.
So you could humiliate me?
No.
It serves as a great example on how to share realistic knowledge on a serious topic while also being funny, something a concerning amount of shows struggle with. Please insert clips of most trans-focused episodes. There's a bunch of other good stuff in this episode too, like how ride or die Steve is for Debbie. Debbie being an overall cool character, not caring if other people think she's fat, how the family treats Stan and his anorexia, etc., etc. But that's what the comments are for. In conclusion, American Dad is good. Eating disorders are bad. Here are sources to get help for anything eating disorder related, whether you have one, think you might have one, or need help for somebody else who might have one. They're also listed down below in the description. I write whole essays in my descriptions sometimes, and most of the time, no one reads them. Anyways, yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe. Sorry I didn't make the detention video yet. It's supposed to come one day.